that was something I that kind of idea there. Yeah. I just did for one of those YouTube videos one night when I was just kind of messing around, and I just, it's something I just sometimes play with occasionally.
Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. Today on the show we have Remi Harris, who's a guitarist from the UK whose unique style draws inspiration from artists such as Django Reinhardt, Jimi Hendrix, Wes Montgomery, Peter Green and Led Zeppelin. Some of his notable performances include the Montreal Jazz Festival, Buckingham Palace, BBC Proms at the Royal Albert Hall with Jamie Cullum, televised on BBC 4, and live on BBC Radio 2 and 3. He has recorded 2 albums to date, Ninick and In on the 2, and has performed a huge amount of gigs around the world. He is a guitarist's guitarist. Hello, Remi, and welcome to the show.
Hello, how's it going?
It's good, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on. But most importantly, a big question for you, Remi. Do you have your guitar with you today?
I do, yes.
Oh, fantastic. So we'll be lucky enough maybe to hear one or two things later, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can play a bit.
Good. Well, it's great to have you on. First of all, how's lockdown affected things with gigs and recording and stuff?
Wow. Well, the gigs just completely dropped off. When was it? March. I forget the exact date of our last gig, but yeah, they were just all called off, and I haven't played a gig since, really. They were being rearranged for autumn, most of them at the time, and now a lot of the autumn dates are now being rearranged for next year because we weren't sure, how long it would go on for. So it's a new experience for everybody. I think it's the longest I've gone without a gig since I was since I was probably at school, actually.
Oh, wow.
So it's strange, but it's been nice as well, because it's allowed me to concentrate on some different aspects of music and playing that I might not have had time to do normally. When we're very busy with gigs, it's kind of all consuming. From my point of view, I'm always working on the stuff that I'm playing on the next gig and keeping everything together for the next show or whatever. And I've not really had to do that so much over the last few months. So I've been able to experiment a bit more, not worry about having to perform on the weekend, which has been nice. So it's been quite creative for me.
Yeah. I've noticed some of your videos on YouTube. Some of the sort of short videos where you're doing various songs and things. Yeah.
I've done those for quite a few years now. It's a nice little creative outlet for me. I like them because often I'll do those little videos. They're generally quite informal, and there'll be often tunes and things that I won't be performing live, so it's something else to work on. Might be stuff I might be practicing in my at home, stuff I'm working on, and then when I'm kind of feeling comfortable with, or getting some ideas together, I'll stick up the little camera and just press record. So a lot of them are very informal. Some of them are a bit more kind of planned, but
no, they're great, and especially the ones in the garden that you've done.
Yeah. Well, when the weather's nice, you've got to get out there, haven't you?
Yeah, of course you have. Just before we talk about your music, can you just give us a little background about yourself and how long you've been playing the guitar and everything, please?
Yeah, so I started playing guitar when I was 7 years old. I was always interested in guitar as long as I can remember. My dad played guitar when I was a kid, so there were photos of me when I was about 3, like holding his guitar and messing around with it. And I had a toy guitar, when I was a toddler. But I got my first real guitar. My dad's left-handed, so I was never going to be able to learn on his guitars. So I got my first proper guitar when I was 7.
Yeah.
And Dad kind of helped me out in the early days. He showed me my first few chords and stuff, and he showed me how to read guitar tab.
Oh, excellent.
And then kind of let me go and kind of get on with it. And every now and again, he'd help me out if I was stuck on things. And we mainly used to learn from guitar magazines back then.
Oh, yes.
We'd go to the newsagents every month and have a look through it was Guitarist,
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Total Guitar and Guitar Techniques, I think, were the three.
These are the ones with like a CD on the front.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're the ones you could play along with. Yeah. And so we'd see what songs, and pick one out, and that's how he learnt, and that's how I've learnt really back then.
So did you ever learn to read music?
No. Well, not at the time. No. I don't really read music, but I can figure it out very slowly. Yeah. But I'm not. I wouldn't say I read music really. I understand it. But I can't sight read anything. No. No.
I mean, a friend of mine, I think a mutual acquaintance, Greg Daffin, introduced me to your music. And I was meant to go and see you at Crowland Abbey about 18 months ago, but unfortunately I wasn't able to go. I wish I'd gone. But when I first started listening to your albums, Ninick and On 2, and saw some of the stuff on YouTube, I was amazed how sort of 1 minute you can do rock and blues and the next minute jazz and then gypsy jazz. That's quite unique for a guitarist, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing rock and blues, so there's two heavy influences in my playing, and there's lots in between. But I grew up playing along to Led Zeppelin and AC/DC and all that kind of stuff. And the first gig I saw was Leonard Skinner when I was 9 years old, I think I was at the time.
Oh wow!
So it was all that kind of music, and the Beatles, of course, and Neil Young and Chuck Berry. And then the whole jazz thing came on in my kind of late teens, and then by the time I was about 20, I was kind of really hooked on jazz music, and I went kind of all in with the jazz. I stopped playing rock. I finished with the rock bands I was playing in, put the electric guitars away, and just really focused on jazz intensely in my early 20s. And so now I've over the last kind of, I don't know, maybe 5 or so, maybe, towards my later 20s, I started getting back, bringing the rock and blues influences back. And so now I just kind of mix it all up, really. That's the idea. I don't want to be kind of strictly in one genre at any one time. Yeah.
No, it's incredible how you do mix it, and I've been watching that. The bit I was interested in is the gypsy jazz thing. Could you tell us a bit about gypsy jazz for listeners who perhaps don't know an awful lot about it?
Yeah, so gypsy jazz was the phrase gypsy jazz. Apparently, it wasn't actually coined until the kind of 80s or 90s, but originally the music comes from gypsy musicians, and in particular Django Reinhardt, who was a gypsy, and he was Belgian born, I believe, but he's always associated with Paris. And back in the 30s, he had the Hot Club of Paris with Stefan Grappelli, and that was an acoustic swing band, basically, rhythm guitars instead of drums, and violin guitar as the lead instruments. That was the initial kind of lineup. And since then, it's grown into what it is today, which is it's known as gypsy jazz. I don't think Django ever thought of himself as playing anything other than jazz. I don't think he thought of it as any kind of niche. He was just a jazz guitar player in his mind. I mean, I think from what I can gather from historical records and things, but yeah, now it's a definite genre of its own. And it's kind of it's a type of swing music, really, but largely based around acoustic guitars with a very specific type of rhythm guitar style.
Is that Le Chomp or something? There's a name for it.
Yeah, Le Pomp.
Oh, Le Pomp. Le Pomp. Yeah. I've tried. I mean, as a guitarist myself, it seems quite difficult to do, and yet when you hear it, you think, oh yeah, that's quite simple.
Yeah. There's a bit of a knack to get in those kind of chord voicings and the right hand, and it's it's a very specific kind of playing style, I guess. And have you come to music through kind of rock music or?
Well, what I did, I started having classical guitar lessons when I was about 13. And I did them for a couple of years, and it got to the end of the couple of years, and my guitar teacher said to me, "I can't really teach you anymore." And also, he said, "Bob, you're not actually reading the music, are you? You're just remembering it." And I said, "Well, I am actually, yeah." So, and then I got into rock and blues, and I was playing, like you do, school bands and early 20s and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I started playing in fact, I was in a Thin Lizzy tribute band up until last year, believe it or not.
Yeah. That's cool.
But it was interesting playing the classical guitar because I always had to work very hard on plectrum technique after using my fingers for so many years.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I find a lot of it depends how you kind of start off. Because for me, day one, I had it. I had my guitar and there's your plectrum. My dad put a plectrum in my hand, and I never played with my fingers, and so I'm very uncomfortable with my fingers now. And I've learnt the odd piece and stuff and fiddled around, but I'm at home with a pick in my hand. But I know, like yourself, I know a lot of guitar players who are the other way around, who their default is to pick up the guitar and use their fingers.
Yes.
And there are guitar players who kind of master both, but I'm not one of those.
No, I'm amazed at the speed you can get. I guess that just comes with practice, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just you do it lots, and that kind of builds up, I guess. Yeah.
A lot of listeners will be playing the guitar, I guess, when they're listening to this. So, for those guitarists who would like to play gypsy jazz, what sort of advice would you give?
Get to jam sessions, I would say. It's really good to get out there, not just kind of learn it in your bedroom. Although obviously most of your kind of studying will be happening at home. But I think getting out there and getting stuck in with jam sessions, it's really good, particularly at the beginning, because you it just really helps you pick things up. You can see people, you can see the finger positions that people use. That was one of the biggest things at the beginning for me, was trying to figure out the right finger positions, because as with the guitar, the same note crops up in many places on a guitar fingerboard. Yeah. So getting the right position to allow you to pick with a kind of gypsy style picking technique. So that all comes from watching people. And I couldn't have figured that out really just by listening to Django. But yeah, so get stuck in like that. Go to jam sessions, have jams, and the other one is just, I think transcribing is the way I basically learn. I think that's the best way to learn kind of tunes and licks and work things out. So I do it by ear, and I use a piece of software that will allow me to slow the music down if I need to. I recommend doing that because at the beginning I used tab a little bit when I first got into gypsy jazz. But I found basically I've pretty much everything I learnt from tab I've now refingered in my own fingerings anyway. And often I'd find the same solo in different books, maybe the same Django solo, but in different books. And they'd all have different fingerings. Yeah. And so I found it much easier just to kind of figure it out myself and maybe try and find someone on YouTube playing it and do it like that. Well, that's how I've done it anyway.
Yeah. So play with other people. Nothing like being put on the spot, is there, when you're with your crowd of people?
Yeah.
And then transcribe yourself. Get some slow down software, and figure it out for yourself and just practice. And I guess you still practice every day, do you, Remi?
Yeah. I kind of have to, really.
Just on the subject of guitars again, I noticed that you're using both British-made guitars or a British-made guitar, and also British strings. Yeah.
I use Newtone strings most of the time. Yeah. I think they're in Derbyshire, and they're really great because you can order kind of custom sets and things. I use my Gypsy set of strings that I use is kind of a custom set that I use a plain third string, which is unusual. I don't know anybody else that does this on a Gypsy guitar.
A plain third string? Yeah,
instead of wound.
As opposed to a wound one?
Yeah, and all Gypsy packs will come with a wound third string. And right from day one, I got my first pack of Gypsy strings, and I replaced it immediately with a plain string out of a pack of whatever electric strings I had around at the time.
Yeah.
Just because I come from that kind of Jimi Hendrix style of playing where you use that third string to bend a lot, and you can't do that so much with a wound string. So I can go to new tone strings and say I'd like this set, and they'll put it together for me. And and also with other guitars as well. I use a plain string on all my acoustic guitars on the third string. So my normal flat top acoustics, I also do custom sets for those as well.
Yeah. And what sort of gauge do you normally use on the E strings?
On the top E, I use a 10 on my Gypsy guitar. Yep. I use 11s on my normal flat tops because they're shorter scale than the Gypsy guitars are a longer scale guitar. And I use 10s, usually 10s on my electrics, sometimes 11s on a Strat, but generally 10s most of the time.
Yeah. So lockdown's coming to an end, I think, or it will do. We really don't know what the future holds, do we? But so I guess for next year, as most of the gigs have been closed for this year, is it mainly a sort of copy and paste till next year?
Well, we're just going to play it by ear, really, to be honest. And we're not exactly sure. I don't know how it will pan out, how quickly the restrictions will be lifted. If there are still social distance rules in place next year, then some of the gigs may continue to be postponed. I'm not sure, because a lot of kind of concert venues where people are tightly packed in rows, like theatres and stuff, their kind of capacities are being halved or even less in order to apply social distancing. Yeah. So we'll just have to play it by ear. I mean, I'm hoping we can get out gigging again, obviously, but we have to see what's happening with the whole coronavirus thing, and I think people's safety kind of comes first, really. So although it's not a great situation, it's just the way it's got to be, maybe until we're out of it.
Yeah, and while the lockdown's been taking place, and you've had to sort of postpone a lot of gigs, could you tell us a bit about the radio show on Bromyard FM?
Oh yeah. So a friend of mine's, I think it was like maybe the first week of lockdown. He's a DJ. That's what he did before the lockdown. Yeah. And I've known him for years. I used to play in a band with him when I was younger. And he put out on Facebook that he was just going to be doing a live radio stream,
Yes.
He'd figured out a way of using his DJ software to broadcast online. And I tuned in, and there was about 10 of us listening in or something like that, just mates, and sending him requests on Facebook and stuff. And it was just really cool. And the whole thing, within about 2 or 3 weeks, had completely blown up. And there are like 5,000 followers on his Facebook, on his group. And he's got lots of different DJs. He's pulled in lots of his friends to do different shows. And now it's called Bromyard FM, and it's running 24/7. And I think the shows with the DJs start kind of 3 p.m. every day and run through till the night. And then the rest of the time it's kind of automatically playing tunes. Yeah. And so it's become a real kind of little lockdown radio station. And he invited me to do a jazz and blues show. And so I do that every Thursday, 8 p.m. till 10 p.m.
And is that a show that you can sort of tune into when you're not on? You can go back to it later? Yeah,
there's a listen back thing on, he uses Mixcloud, and the shows all get uploaded up to there. So you can listen back after the fact, yeah. And when you listen live, you can kind of send in requests and stuff. And if I've got the recordings here, I can do all that and give people shout outs and stuff as well. Yeah. So it's really fun.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. We'll put the links on the show notes, if that's okay, so people can tune in.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks.
And the other thing I was going to ask about was Yardbird Arts. Yeah. Could you tell us a bit about Yardbird Arts, please, Remi?
Yeah, so Yardbird Arts is our kind of business, I guess. It's me and my wife Danny. We set it up as basically originally it was as a record label to release our second album, In on the Two.
Yeah,
because we want to release it ourselves, and you need kind of label to put it under, and so we set up Yardbird Arts. But then it became also the kind of umbrella kind of company, I guess, that manages all my gigs and puts on, and we started putting on concerts as well. So it's become kind of a promotion company where we'd hire out village halls and put on shows, and then also book in my tours and now with the lockdown here, Danny, my wife, she's going to be doing some cooking. She's a really good cook, and and so we're converting a kitchen now into a catering kitchen. And so we're going to put the van to use because at the minute it's just empty, with no gigs on the map. So we're going to so there'll be a kind of a catering arm to Yardbird Arts as well.
Well,
so
that's excellent, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically just me and Danny and anything we kind of want to do,
Oh, that's great. Yeah. When you became professional, was that in your early 20s?
Yeah. I would think I was maybe 21 or 22, I think, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. I worked part-time in a guitar shop.
Right.
Up until then. And then I managed to kind of get enough gigs.
Yeah. One question I'd like to ask, you've been very passionate about playing the guitar for most of your life. And you're also a professional guitarist. It's your main job, your main source of income. Does that passion ever go away because it's a job, or do you feel that the two work together?
It's a difficult question. It can do sometimes, when you're really tired, and especially when you're touring a lot and you're getting home late, and you just, there was a period in my kind of late 20s where I just felt completely exhausted all of the time, and I was just overdoing it, really. I was we were just taking too many gigs on, and I don't think we had a holiday for years and years, and it would just so it can, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm ungrateful for doing what I do, because I love playing the guitar. I think it's mainly just about finding a balance and not wearing yourself out, which is the same with anything in life. So so it is about keeping inspired is something I try and do, and
And so far in your career, what sort of highlights you've had in terms of gigs and playing with other musicians? Are there any that you could tell us about?
Yeah, well, I suppose the most kind of high profile thing I've done is play the BBC Proms with Jamie Cullum at the Albert Hall, and that was a pretty nerve-wracking experience. But that was cool. Jamie's been really amazing. He supported me with my music through the BBC Introducing scheme, which I uploaded my first album there, because basically there used to be our local BBC Hereford and Worcester station. They used to have a show called the Friday Session, and it was local acts, and it was the guy who ran the show was called Andrew Marsden, and he'd go out to local gigs in like Hereford and stuff, and he'd do interviews with the bands and invite them on the show and stuff like that. And so we got to know Andrew a little bit when I used to play in rock bands.
Oh yeah.
And I'd been on his show a few times, and then at some point the BBC brought along the BBC Introducing thing, and that replaced the Friday Session. And so when I made my blues, my jazz album, my first jazz album, I messaged Andrew and I said, "Oh, can I send you my new album?" And he said, "Oh, it's all changed now. You've got to upload it to BBC Introducing, and then it will come through to me that way." And so I had no idea what the potential of it was, but so I uploaded some tracks, and they ended up going through to him, and then the way the scheme works is the regional DJs, so the Hereford and Worcester, and the different stations, they'll kind of pass stuff on to the national shows. And so at some point he'd recommended my stuff through to Jamie Cullum, and Jamie had taken a listen and liked it, and he played a track and invited me to go and play on his show on Radio 2. And
wow.
We did a live session for him, and that was live from Cheltenham Jazz Festival. And
did he sing along at all on any songs?
Not at that point, no. But from that it went on, and we ended up being invited to Montreal Jazz Festival over in Canada. Wow. And Jamie was there as well, and he introduced us, and was part of the whole process. Yeah. And then I don't know, a few months later, we were invited to appear on his Proms performance, and that was where he'd sing with us. So it's been the support we've had from the introducing and Jamie and Andrew Marsden at BBC Hereford and Worcester, and also off the back of that we had Cerys Matthews played our track on her show, and we were picked up. I think we were played, I think, by Tom Robinson as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was all through this introducing thing. So it's a really amazing scheme, and I recommend any kind of artists who are kind of up and coming to get your stuff up on the BBC uploader and make a profile and see what happens.
So you've had 2 albums out, Ninick and In on the 2. Any plans for a third one?
Yeah, well, it's nearly finished actually.
Excellent.
We were working on it right up until lockdown, and then it's all been put on the shelf. But I've been talking to the studio over the last week. Actually, we're going to try and get back to it, but it's mostly been recorded. We've just got to do a few overdubs. I think we might have to record another track or 2. But as soon as possible, we'll have a new one out.
Well, that's excellent. And is it a mixture of covers and your own compositions, or?
Yeah, this one there's some jazz standards, and there's a few of my own on there as well. Yeah.
So, the next question I've got, and I'm rubbing my hands now. What are you going to play for us?
I'm not sure. I thought I'd just kind of improvise a little thing, something I kind of mess around with sometimes.
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
Let me grab my guitar. I'm going to have to tune it because it's got some new strings on it.
No, that's fine.
Is it loud enough? Can you hear the guitar okay?
Yes, I can hear it fine, thank you, Remi. Yeah, it's good.
something like that.
Oh, that was beautiful. Just hearing those notes, Remi, absolutely incredible.
Oh, thank you.
All those notes just flowing, like a waterfall. It was beautiful. That.
Oh, thank you.
That's that's really good. I love that. Yeah, I hope I know that the listeners will love that. That's for sure. That's a real gem. Is that something that you is like a warm up thing that you do?
Yeah, it's kind of I just like messing around with it. It's not really a piece. It's completely different every time I play, but it's kind of a vague kind of improvisation that I often do. It actually started as a kind of one of those YouTube videos.
Oh yeah.
This little kind of theme like this. That was something that kind of idea there. Yeah. I just did for one of those YouTube videos one night when I was just kind of messing around, and it's something I just sometimes play with occasionally.
Yeah. No, that's. I'm sure that gets it would certainly get my fingers warming up if I could get that speed. Great. Okay. Now, is there anything else that you'd like to tell listeners about anything coming up at all? Any other projects?
We're kind of a bit unsure about all the projects at the moment. We were working on a rock and blues project at the start of the year, and that's something I'd like to work on again, because I do really miss playing kind of louder kind of rock music.
Yeah.
And my friend who I grew up playing with since I was a little boy, we started playing together. He would have been, I think he was 11 and I would have been 13, I think, something like that, when we were having a little rock band. And we started playing together again over the last few years. So we want to do a kind of a rock project. So that's definitely in the pipeline at some point.
Is that with a Les Paul or a Stratocaster?
Yeah, I use both. Yeah, Les Pauls and Strats. Yeah, I used to, growing up, I was big on the Les Paul. That was through my teens. Obviously, I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. I always have been a big Zepp fan. And Jimmy Page is, when I was a kid, he was my hero, and still is. To be honest, I still listen to Led Zeppelin most days, and so that's why I used to play a Les Paul a lot. But I really like the Strat. I love the dynamic range you can get out of a Strat, because of players like Stevie Ray Vaughan and that kind of Texas Strat sound. Of course, Jimi Hendrix as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've got both guitars, Remi, and I just love the Strat, the way that you don't have to have it quite as overdriven necessarily. I don't think.
No,
you can play cleaner, and you still get a lot of good, good wide sound coming out, don't you?
Yeah, and even when it is a bit dirty, it still kind of sounds clean as well.
Yes.
The way it gets, I think, because there's a lot of in a Strat, there's quite a lot of mids missing it's kind of almost a scooped mid range in the tone, and so that means when you do apply kind of overdrive, it still remains kind of crystal,
Yeah.
Whereas a Les Paul gets really beefy, and so they've got completely different qualities. And also, one of the things I'm really interested is with guitars is the way they're kind of constructed, and what makes them sound different, And with a Gypsy guitar, the scale length is longer than pretty much all other guitars, and that kind of makes it. That's one of the things that allows it to sound very bright. It's got a real bark to it, a Gypsy guitar.
It has, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's partly obviously the body construction, the way it's with the small sound hole and the way it's constructed. But I think the scale length has a lot to play with that as well. So the longer the string, the more kind of tension there is, more kind of it's snappier sounding.
Yes. And
then you've got with the electric guitars, you've got two common scale lengths. You've got the Strat, which is 25.5 inch, and then you've got the Gibson, which is 24 3/4, I believe. And so that if you put the same strings on both, they feel different, and that snappier sound, I think, also contributes to that kind of Stratocaster twang.
Yeah.
So
and on the electric, do you keep in concert pitch, or do you go down a semitone?
I'm in standard these days. We used to play down we used to play down a semitone back in the day, but I had to put heavier strings on in order to allow that. So I used to play with higher gauge, but then tune it down, and I really like the results of that. I love the sound and the way it feels and everything, but it just makes things hard when you want to jam with people and everything's a semitone out, and you've got to. It's not that easy to tune things up because the tension changes and the truss rods and all of that kind of thing. But I think if I had endless resources, I'd have all my rock guitars tuned to E flat, and then have all the same guitars then duplicated in standard. Especially with the jazz stuff, because you can move keys around easy, but I kind of like to be able to E flat for me is there, so it's is the Gypsy guitar tuned down then, or is that concert pitch? That's concert. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's they're kind of. Have you ever played one of these guitars? This type?
I've never played one. It's a style of guitar it's a style of playing that I'd very much like to do, and I think you're probably right. I think you've got to have that guitar to get that sound, haven't you? Oh yeah, definitely. I've tried numerous different things, and that type of guitar, particularly the longer scale one. So the original design, I'm not sure if are you familiar with the history of the Gypsy style guitars? No, but I'd be very keen to learn.
Yeah, cool. So
as would our listeners.
hopefully.
Yeah. I will just say before we start on this, Remi, this show will be going out to a lot of guitarists as well as listeners. So if we lose some of the listeners who don't know an awful lot about guitars, please forgive us, but you'll learn something in the process.
So basically the Gypsy guitar, it was designed I learned all this properly because I used to talk about this on stage, but I might have my dates muddled now, but I think it was 1932 when Mario Macferri, who was an Italian luthier, he worked with the Selma Company in Paris, and they came up with this original design, which was the design with the big D hole. I don't know if you've ever seen photos of Gypsy guitarists with the big D-shaped hole.
Is that what Django would have used?
Well, he did. He used both.
Yeah.
But I think he preferred the oval hole. The D hole was kind of Mark I of that design. And the reason for the D hole was inside the guitar there was what they called a resonator, and that was a series of kind of chambers with wooden panels, and it was all kind of designed to kind of work like some kind of like a speaker maybe, or probably not a speaker, but more maybe like a foghorn,
All right, yeah.
Kind of it funnels the sound out and projects the sound out. Like a gramophone maybe, but they weren't that successful with that design, because apparently one of the reasons was the glue wasn't that great and they used to rattle, and so people used to take all the gubbins out, all the kind of panels and resonator stuff, and you'd end up with a hollow guitar but with a big D hole for no specific reason. And those guitars were shorter scale. I don't know the exact length, but I think they were classical scale. So they were 12 fret to the body.
Yeah.
So they were shorter. But Mark II of that design was they made it longer, made it 14 frets to the body, and made the scale length longer. And then they put the small sound hole on. And the small sound hole is meant to kind of work, at least a luthier told me once that it was meant to work a bit like when you put your thumb over a tap and it increases the pressure of the water.
Yeah.
At least that's what I was told. And so that kind of contributes to that bark. Yeah. That kind of shouty sound which you get out of a Gypsy guitar. But it means it can be loud because they were designed before electric guitars. and everything was about volume, really. I think back then you had the resonator guitars, like the metal guitars.
Yes,
that was another attempt at making acoustic guitars louder.
Yeah.
So that was why they were kind of invented. But obviously, coincidentally, I think the first electric guitar pickup came out in around the same time, but it was in America, and it was on originally on a lap steel, the frying pan guitar, which was like a Hawaiian type guitar. And then, as electric guitar pickups kind of advanced forward, there was no need for kind of acoustic guitars that kind of were really loud.
Yeah.
So they kind of got lost into the history books.
And you've got your own signature model, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, this is it. I'm holding it now. Yeah, it's with filed guitars, which is they made up in Penrith, up in the Lake District.
Okay.
And
and the guitar's called a Remi.
It's called a Remi Harris model, I think he calls it.
Remi Harris model. Oh, right.
Yeah. But it's essentially a Gypsy style guitar. There's a few tweaks. I like a slightly thinner neck than a traditional Gypsy guitar, just because I like to be able to bend the neck. I like chunky necks when I'm playing, but I can't do kind of right on the harmonics. Yeah. By just kind of pushing the neck. You're not really meant to do that, but but having a thinner neck allows you to do that. And
sounds great.
Yeah. Other than that, it's kind of Roger at File Guitars. He makes them. He doesn't. They're not identical copies of the original design, but they're based on with some of his kind of own personal tweaks.
Yeah. So, do you think that the Gypsy jazz guitar is becoming more popular?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially through the internet. YouTube has kind of changed everything. Because back in the 80s, if you wanted to see this type of guitar playing, you'd have to physically go to France and go to the Django Festival at Samoa, and which happens every year at the end of June, I think. And you literally have to go and see it for yourself. But now, of course, you can all sit at home watching it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And the style of guitar playing is very, it's kind of, it's very interesting. I think people really are drawn to it because there's a lot of romanticism about the history of the music and all of that. And obviously Django being one of the greatest guitar players of all time, and it all being kind of based off what he gave us, so
with his three fingers.
Yeah. Well, apparently most of his lead stuff was done with two, with his index and middle.
Yeah.
And the other two were kind of paralyzed through after a caravan fire. Yeah, he had a fire, and it shrunk the tendons in his hand.
Yeah. And
that meant that his ring finger and his little finger were kind of bent over slightly, and he couldn't use them properly. But I think he could use them for chords. That's what people say. But
more than made up for it in his playing, didn't he? I mean, absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable what he did. Really, I still find it hard to believe.
Yeah. Well, Remi, this has been a great conversation. How can people find out more about your work?
The best place is just check me out on my website, remiharris.com, and from there you can get links to everything, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, all that kind of stuff.
We'll put all that on the show notes so people can link to the various sites that you have.
That's great, thanks. Thank you for having me on.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's been good.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Remi.
Thanks. Yeah, my pleasure.
My thanks go to today's guest, Remi Harris, guitarist and musician. I really enjoyed the conversation with Remi, and it was a real privilege to have Remi play on the show. We talked a lot about jazz, particularly gypsy jazz, for which Remi is widely known. However, I urge you to listen to Remi's albums and watch his YouTube videos, where the style of his playing, both electric and acoustic, features rock, blues as well as jazz. In the words of Jamie Cullum, he is an extraordinary musician. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope that you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe or follow the show for future episodes. And if you like what you hear, please share the show link to your friends and family. And if you have 60 seconds, I would be most grateful if you would please rate and review the show. Please check out our webpage and social media links where details can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells, wishing all the very best.